And we're live. Bad morning to everybody out there. Apologies for the lateness, but we were trying to test the stream output, which does work now. The only problem was that it was a rather one-sided conversation, according to anybody watching the stream, because fucking my audio wasn't coming through for some reason. So I'm gonna figure out how to do that. Basically just need to figure out how to get my audio to go through OBS as well. We'll be figuring that out at some other point, though. For now, it is the fucking 5th of September. So let's jump right into all the news bullshit that we have for today. Let's start with cryptic-cynic. Let's start with your CDC quarantine.
All right, sorry about that. Was muted. All right, bad morning, everybody. Yeah, just came across this article on the Free Thought Project. Breaking news: CDC quarantines entire airplane in New York as 100 passengers contract unknown illness. The CDC has quarantined an entire airplane at JFK Airport after more than 100 passengers fell ill. The counterterrorism team from the NYPD is also on scene. New York passengers have been quarantined on board an Emirates airplane at JFK Airport in New York after 100 reportedly fell seriously ill during a flight from Dubai. Emirates Flight 203 from Dubai arrived at 9 a.m. Wednesday, with the pilot expressing concerns over dozens of passengers sick with fevers over 100 degrees Fahrenheit and coughing, according to local reports. The plane was met by officials from the Port Authority Police and the CDC in a staging area to check passengers. NYPD counterterrorism said it was monitoring the quarantine in case the incident progressed above a medical situation, and that it was working with the Port Authority and federal partners. The aircraft is not going to a terminal, instead being directed to a hard stand area as emergency medical response teams investigate the cause of the illness. Photographs tweeted by passengers inside the plane show dozens of ambulances and police vehicles parked and waiting as the aircraft landed. One passenger, Larry Cohen, said, "All we have been told is that some passengers have fallen ill and we should remain in our seats." He tweeted that he had seen no evidence of illness, but added that Flight 203 has 2 levels. While the cause of the illness remains unknown, local reports on the ground from a source briefed on the situation believe it may be food-related. However, this may change with new information provided by the CDC. So, I guess that's just breaking just a couple hours ago, and not too much information. And of course, counterterrorism is on scene. You're ready to let us know they're there in case of some foodborne attack by people who hate our freedom, I guess. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, so I watched The Strain, and with that background, I can say nothing good will come of this.
Yeah, I have to admit, the first thing that popped into my head was The Strain. When I heard this article, I was like, "Huh, this probably won't be pretty, one way or the other."
Really bad morning, a vampire apocalypse is about to touch off. So,
yeah.
Rain, is that like a TV show or a movie or something?
It's a TV series. It's basically modern day vampire zombie apocalypse kind of thing.
Yeah, it was a Del Toro project. If you're a fan of him, I am, and that's what led me to watch it. It was a lot of fun.
It has to be said, it was a pretty good series from a entertainment perspective, but I never thought I'd see any kind of parallel to it in real life until today.
Well, okay, so I mean, in terms of were the character developments good? I mean, in terms of entertainment, you can be entertained by the worst things, like fucking
Well, and I certainly
Neil
can.
Brain.
So, but that
Well,
said, the character development's kind of hit or miss between the characters. Some of
Yeah.
them developed really well, others,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the leads were a bit meh, but the ancillary characters, they really did develop them quite well. You
Gotcha.
actually want to like them, that kind of thing. Or love to hate them, one or the other.
Or need them, or want them.
That kind of thing.
So okay, so well, I hope all the passengers make it safely off that plane. I'm sure it cannot be a settling process to be stuck on a plane there. So
I just found it interesting that somebody came out and said, nobody's ill. Oh, wait, there is a second floor. But if there are two floors to it, A, which floor was he on, the bigger or the smaller one? And B, if it's the smaller one, does it actually hold 100 people? Because for all we know, there could have been other reasons why the plane was grounded that had nothing to do with the CDC, but it's a convenient way of grounding a plane.
yeah.
Remember,
and,
there's
kind of
always another angle.
That's kind of the twist where things start to get a little bit weird, and this is something we should all keep an eye on if we can. Just monitor this going forward. See what comes out now and then gets buried later.
Yeah. Well, and of course, who's on that plane anyway? Because if they wanted to just waylay somebody, or if they wanted to control them so that they could, fucking end somebody's existence, then this would be a perfect time to do that. So fucking whoever they are, I'm saying like ambiguous.
The nebulous sense of they.
Yeah, fucking.
The great all-powerful they lurking in the long grass.
Exactly. So on that note, I've got a few articles on the fucking internet censorship blah that I'm gonna delve into a little bit later. But for now, why don't you go over that Brexit thing? Because there can apparently never be enough said about Brexit, which, god damn it, cannot happen soon enough.
Well, okay, basically, let's see, where do we begin? We've got two hit pieces, but I think the one I'll start with is from the Express. So for reference again, this is for Britain, more right-leaning than not. So the Express published Tuesday, September 4th. UK would be a colony of EU. Lord Lawson demands Britain walk away with Chequers warning. Brexiteer Lord Nigel Lawson warned that Prime Minister Theresa May's controversial Chequers proposal would make Britain a colony to the European Union after Brexit. The former Chancellor said Chequers' Brexit plan had been conspicuously unsuccessful in uniting the Conservative Party. Speaking on talk radio, the Tory peer said, what it effectively does is make the United Kingdom not a member of the European Union, but a colony of the European Union. Governed outside it, but governed by the European Union. Of course, the whole purpose of Brexit was to recover our independence and become, once again, a self-governing democracy. So it is, if you say, like a compromise, the worst of all worlds. Lord Lawson insisted that if the Chequers deal is not accepted, then Britain will leave the bloc without an agreement on trade. The former Chancellor insisted that under World Trade Organization rules would be better than the proposed Chequers deal. He said, quote, there is always the agreement on overseas citizens. There is already behind-the-scenes agreement on security issues, which is very important. When we leave without a trade agreement, we will abide by WTO rules. The bulk of the world doesn't have trade agreements. The bulk of the world trades very heavily and successfully on World Trade Organization terms. Indeed, the rest of the world outside the European Union is rather better than the European Union. Lord Lawson also insisted that Theresa May has been consumed by political ambition. He said, quote, people always say in the context of Boris Johnson that he is highly ambitious. He is, but that is not altogether rare in politics. And the politician who has been most consumed by political ambition is Theresa May. Mrs. May's Brexit plan, calling for close regulatory alignment with the EU's single market for British exports, is a firm push towards a soft Brexit. There's a little bit further on this, including his words from BBC Radio 4 and a number of other sources. But yeah, basically, this particular lord is quite keen to see the Chequers deal die. So am I. I actually wholeheartedly agree with his analogy, with his analysis and assessment of the situation. It is a travesty of errors. It will do exactly as he says, and there's nothing to improve the lot for the British people. And I'm not the only one who considers this to be the case, nor is that lord that I spoke of before. Mervyn King, the Bank of England governor, has said authorities' Brexit incompetence is being condemned by him specifically. The frail Bank of England Governor Mervyn King has condemned the incompetence of the authorities' preparations for Brexit. This is coming from Newsline.com by Karine Mraz. Lord King, who supported leaving the EU within the past, said it beggars perception that the sixth greatest economy within the field is talking about stockpiling medicines and food. He urged that Britain had been placed in this bill by Parliament as a full, along with the authorities and the civil provider. I'm sorry, this is Newsline, so their editorial staff leaves a lot to be desired. Frankly, if an authority cannot circulate to conclude most of these catastrophic outcomes, no topic. Oh, Jesus Christ! I can't actually read this. It's not English. I'm really sorry about that. I thought it would actually be somewhat decently printed. But yeah, to paraphrase, basically, Mervyn King is also speaking out against Brexit in particular. He is, being the Bank of England governor, he does have quite a bit of clout in the business community. And it's not the idea of leaving that's the problem for him. It's the plan that's been put forward. It's not a plan. It's basically, oh, we'll just agree to whatever Europe says. And that's not what the whole point of Brexit was. It was so that you could decide these things for yourself, not just defer.
Well, right, and not to mention the fact that, like, all these deals, I guess, because I can't really call them that knowing what they are. All these deals do is compromise everything about Brexit in exchange for essentially not being cunts. I mean, so they're cunts in exchange for not being cunts. That seems like a real bad deal to me. Like, I don't know why every Brexiter isn't just shouting walk away.
A lot of us are. I mean, and this is the kind of, I'll be honest, I think Mervyn King might be as well. Because I finally found an article that actually printed what he actually said, and it's from The Guardian. Frankly, if a government cannot take action to prevent some of these catastrophic outcomes, whatever position you take on the EU, it illustrates a whole lack of preparation. Doesn't tell us anything about whether or not the policy of staying in the EU is good or bad. It tells us everything about the incompetence of the preparation for it. So, yeah, basically the government has screwed the pooch. And no surprise there to those of us who've actually been following this kind of thing. And as frustrating and annoying as it isn't as if this is something anybody should be surprised about. This is what most of us predicted.
And that's just the thing right there, right? If I can interject for a moment. We know the ruling class never actually wanted Brexit. So everything since the vote has just been one long, backpedal into softening it as much as they can, It's not in their interests.
Well, the elites want the debate because the debate distracts from pretty much every other issue. I mean, for instance, Jonathan Pye that YouTube comedian guy, he's made a very solid point of like telling people effectively that this is a way to stifle any other sort of conversation because it's always Brexit conversations and never conversations of any substance about any issues that like literally are affecting Britain right now. So the elites could want Brexit because the elites could want this thing to dangle over the working class, while they actually don't act Brexit, you know?
Well, right, and that's I guess a supplementation of the point I'm making. It's good for them to be able to drive the conversation about something without ever actually doing it. That's how narratives work.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, part of the problem with the whole Brexit discussion is the how can I put this? You're right in it's partly a distraction tactic, but it's not at the same time because it is quite critical to what will or will not be happening here in the long term. So it's not as if it's something that we can just go, oh, it's a short-term thing. No, this is going to be driving decision making for at least several years.
Right.
I mean, only if it actually happens, though, right?
Well, but here's okay. So yeah, only if it happens. But
well, the only way
there's always there's always the fucking like kiss and a promise, dude. Like when you end up with a California straw ban that tries to like eliminate sea waste by plastic straws, I think that's emblematic of the way much of modern politics works, because it doesn't actually change anything, but it talks about things that have an effect in the long term. So yes, we absolutely do need to have less environmental impact. We absolutely do need to have biodegradable waste. We absolutely do need to reduce plastics, in almost every possible way. We absolutely 100% do. This affects the like entire planet's ability to thrive, and the fact that so many obstacles exist in the way of nature being in harmony with mankind is a fucking problem, and a huge one. It makes us a virus and a cancer on this goddamn planet. So the environmental discussion is one that's necessary to have, but the people steering it almost always steer it to also give me free abortions and birth control pills, and also give me equal pay, and also give me fucking all these other things in this cargo cult that I'm piling on because I'm a leftist and I ultimately don't like Republicans more than I like a clean environment. So yeah, it's a necessary conversation to have, but that doesn't mean that the conversation is being had properly, and it doesn't mean that the conversation was designed to be had properly. All I'm trying to emphasize is the fact that the elites might not have that sort of like binarism. They might just have different ways to shuffle around their corporate profits. Like, for instance, the US government, they're not a Saudi government, but somehow they keep on getting Saudi money to their politicians. The US government also similarly is not a minister in Palestine or Israel. Sorry, not Palestine, Afghanistan or Israel. But somehow Afghanistan and Israel keep on getting a huge amount of US money, and somehow keep on also pushing forward policies and allowing boots on the ground that benefit the US. So yeah, like a country cannot be another country's like affiliate, but that doesn't mean that the other country isn't effectively that country's bitch. And so even if Brexit totally happens, the elites still have ways to micromanage their way into the economy because they're fucking little like cephalopod tentacle bullshits. And so like to say that the elites would have a severe problem maintaining their control if Brexit happened, I think is underestimating, the elites.
That wasn't
Well, and
my
I don't
point,
think
mate.
I was implying that. I don't think either of us were.
Well,
No.
I think that almost everybody who supports Brexit is. I think that that's what the Brexit movie implied, that this was a way to get at it under the thumb of the elites' internationalism, the elites' globalism, the fucking we don't care about how the common working bloke feels. We're gonna still fuck him over because it gets us money. That the elites do. That's what the Brexit movement was. It was a movement designed to remove the effects of the elite, remove their influence. But I'm saying that it's not
I
that
think
easy. It's a good
I
first
think
step.
it's well, yeah. There's that, and that's part of the point. Is that it's a step. It's not the end. I
Well, for
don't
a lot
think
of
it's not
Brexiters, it
what.
was.
Not for the ones, not for the one that you're talking to,
Well, yeah,
but
okay, but that's like spotlight fallacy.
well, I'm not claiming that Brexit is for that either. I'm not saying those things. I
No, but
haven't.
I'm not saying you are. I'm saying the common Brexiter I've spoken to is. They're saying once we're out under the thumb of the EU, our economy will finally be able to thrive again. You know, and I disagree firmly. I think that it's going to take a huge amount more than just removing yourself from one political union to get out from under all of the possible things that the economy is suffering for. Like, it'll still be a member state of the UN, as far as I'm aware.
Oh, it's true, but I think the point is if they don't even have that one step, there's no hope.
Well, right, absolutely, and so I
And
agree
there
that it
are
needs to
people.
happen.
The problem is that there are people in Britain who are actively advocating for a second referendum, not just on what the decision is around whether or not we accept the government's ruling on Brexit, but also whether or not we even go forward with it and just basically undo the past 2 years instantaneously somehow by magic. It's like to me, I mean, for most people to want to go back after the amount of acrimony that has been given to Britain, it beggars belief. It's like you can tell either these guys are being paid or they're so lockstep into some sort of movement they can't see the wood for the trees. And it drives me, to be quite frank, crazy to have to discuss why this actually happened because those proponents who are more vocal and have mouthpieces that are quite powerful over here, they're the ones who are trying to stop Brexit of any sort from even occurring. It's like, well, if the government can't do this, then we shouldn't do it. No, that doesn't make sense. Just because the government can't do something doesn't mean it isn't worth doing. Just means that it isn't worth doing with the government doing it. That's all. You can still do the task without having the state involved. And I think some people are realizing that to an extent. I think a lot of people actually would prefer monarchy to some extent over here now, given the feel of how things are. They want localized governments.
Well, right, and like I'm not trying to disparage that. What I'm saying is that to try and act like this isn't something the elites could want is a mistake in my view. That's what I'm saying.
It's an opportunity for them to curtail it, I'd say. It's an opportunity for them to game whatever comes out. And they want that opportunity. I'm not going to deny that. But that opportunity has to be balanced, or it has to be assessed alongside what everybody else is saying about the matter, as it were. If that makes sense. Because if you don't take all those facets into account, you won't get a full picture of what actually will happen. And the interesting thing I find is you mentioned the elites. Mervyn King and this Lord I would consider to be elites, and they're actively saying the government is incapable of doing this. Now, that could either be a game to try to, say, we need to back out of this whole process. But given the people who are saying it, I'm not of the mind that that is the case. I think it's the opposite. They think that a no deal is the best solution, which is the
Okay.
closest solution currently available to anything approaching a free market solution. And to that, I am always going to say, yep, that sounds like a good idea. Because you wipe out a huge number of laws. If you go to WTO rules, then you have a very basic, fully negotiated set of terms that all of these regions are willing to work by. And
Right.
they've worked for a lot of those regions. So I see the argument as compelling as I see the argument as compelling where you don't see much to be compelling about it around it will improve the economy because logically it should. I'm not saying it necessarily will because there's always the chance that somebody could game it. But the probability is decent at least that it will benefit people more than not.
See, and I would be with you on that. I've seen the reason the EU exists in the first place is because the elites decided to game existing economies. So there's always the potential for that in the future. And the Bilderberg Group, for instance, is completely unelected, unaccountable, off the books, fucking in secret, in a basement, and like they control and conduct a huge amount of global policy and get away with it. And they have huge armed security patrols to make sure that they can keep doing it. So my point is that the elites don't always operate in the open, if that wasn't already obvious. And the elites don't need the full faith and credit of a government that's operating on, one set of terms or another to get what they need to do done. All they need to do is have certain politicians that are bribable and certain politicians that are forcible, and the rest of them are a vast minority and usually ignored. I
Fair
wonder
enough.
why.
Hmm.
That's why this referendum hasn't worked yet. That's why the Brexit hasn't happened yet. It's because of politicians who have their hands in too many coffers.
That's fair enough. These things, I will say, this whole process has been a bloody farce. I mean, even the election, for crying out loud, that we had not too long ago was a travesty of errors. And at that point, I realized, yep, this is not gonna end well for anybody. It's just going to be an absolute bollock. They're going to try to make everybody sick of the discussion, but nobody will be willing to be sick of the discussion because they know how fucking important it is. So it's
going back to the first points we made, that sounded like it was the plan from the beginning, right? At least in terms of what their incentives look like from our angle.
Oh yeah, from our perspective, it does look like people trying to drive everybody into a mind-numbing stupor of insanity over Brexit until everybody is so divided that nobody can come to agreement on anything, and they all just go, "Oh fuck it, we'll stick with what we had because we know it worked." And then nobody gets what they actually wanted, except for the people who originally voted and the elite who want it to be that way. That, I think, kind of was the rather retarded plan that they tried to come up with. And the reason why I say it's retarded is literally everybody over here thinks it's still quite important a subject. If it wasn't, it wouldn't still be part of the major discourses at work and in news broadcasts and everywhere else. So it really does become an issue, when, for them at least, because they can't just brush it under the table with some other story because somebody else is going to bring it up. Or the people saying we should just get out of everything as quickly as possible will produce a few more articles to justify their point. And whoever has the most convincing argument wins.
Yeah. Well, and also, of course, the elites have always been very good at exhausting people and making sure that their resources are so spread so thinly that they can't even function on a level of activism. They deactivate people. They spend their batteries because, effectively they found out how good wars of attrition can be. And they know that they can just have that with people that effectively think that they can fight from their keyboards. Ultimately, people are going to have to realize that they need to fight from their much more than their keyboards in order to succeed here. I mean, reasonably, this all would have been over like, a year, 2 years ago, maybe, if fucking people had taken up arms. But they didn't. They didn't take up arms. They didn't fight this government physically. The only fights that they've been having are essentially with their common person over whether or not their common person is right or wrong about Brexit. And that's the point. You exhaust your enemies, you make sure all their resources are expended, and at that point, you don't need to fight them. They're already defeated. They have zero. You can't fight a war with zero money. The poor classes are the ones most affected by the issues Brexit wanted to address. And you can't fight a war with no food. There are hungry people in Britain getting hungrier because of lost jobs and an economy taking a hit from massive regulatory bullshit and an EU that blocks any sort of free trade with other countries. And you can't fight a war without energy. And most people's energy is so expent by just following essentially the daily bollocks, and they don't have the energy to give a shit, much less to get up from their keyboards and pick up a gun. Much less the ability to pick up a gun, because let's be completely straight, you can't fight a war without arms either.
And
So
we aren't armed. And may I also add, I don't believe that either of us is actually advocating for a wholesale revolution, are we?
I would never advocate for that on the terms of the Smith Act and on a public network associated with the ClearNet and DARPANet. I would never
No, we would never do that.
I would never advocate for revolution on YouTube and a Five Eyes controlled security network run by an institution consistently venture funded by the global intelligence services to spy on us all and make sure that we're being good boys. I would never advocate for revolution in a world that treats us all like tax cows that need to be fleeced and milked and eventually slaughtered for our meat, so that our next young can grow up into the system without knowing how bad it is, only knowing that they miss their parents. I would never advocate for such a thing. I would never say that you should take up arms, because that would be a violation of the Smith Act, and I'm a good, patriotic American citizen.
Yes,
I'd just like to second everything Jeremiah said.
Just then, yeah.
Absolutely not. Don't go pick up a gun. Don't shoot any government officials ever. Don't learn how to make explosives or poison gases, and don't ever use this information in any possible way.
Yeah, don't pick up that axe in the cupboard. No, not that one. The other one.
Exactly. So, with that being said, and talking about the Five Eyes, I think Minark has an article from Activist Post about Facebook's midterm election war room. Because while we're talking Five Eyes supported networks, we might as well go with one that was funded by Keyhole in its early years, and one that now operates effectively as a spy grid to begin with, and an information collection system. So why don't you take that away, and then I'll get into some other aspects of what's been going on in the social censorship news.
Yeah, so our headline here reads, Facebook building war room to monitor midterm elections in real time. Published September 4th, 2018, and the byline comes from a Joe Jankowski. Facebook is gearing up for the upcoming midterm elections by building a physical, quote, war room, unquote, in order to fight off, quote, bad actors, unquote, who wish to influence voters. Facebook's head of civic engagement, Samid Chakrabarti, told NBC in an interview published Tuesday that the company was in a better place than it was in 2016 in regards to fighting misinformation and fake news. I think we are in a much better place than we were in 2016, but it is an arms race, and so that's why we're remaining ever vigilant, laser focused, to make sure that we can stay ahead of new problems that emerge, Chakrabarti said. According to the top executive, the social giant has become effective over the past 2 years in, quote, combating foreign interference, unquote, and blocking and deleting unwanted fake accounts. Facebook is taking its responsibility, as Mark Zuckerberg put it, to battle these potential bad actors so seriously that it will have in place a physical war room where in real time the company will hope to guarantee fair elections. The command center, like space, will be composed of people of different trades who will be able to take, quote, quick and decisive action, unquote, if needed. When asked what some of the tactics and strategies that his company was using to detect malicious activity, Chakrabarti admitted that Facebook is, quote, just one small part of a much bigger puzzle, unquote. That includes governments and security experts around the world. And it goes on very briefly, not really saying anything too much more. They've got a response from Russia Times about it. But the moral of the story is here, Facebook is inviting the government in to actively censor their news feeds as elections will be taking place. That sounds pretty freaking horrible, doesn't it? Like, this is the next step into real-time control of information and narratives. And it's only going to keep getting worse.
Yep.
No, I'd agree. I'd like to know his work
You know what?
history.
On top of that, there's people freaking inviting this in, too. Like, yeah, obviously we know they are. But the whole Russian interference psyop was crafted just to get us to this moment. You know, we're seeing the long play unfold in real time here.
Exactly.
I mean, can I actually bring something up on that front? Because there's an interesting facet to the whole Russia did it psyop. You know, those FISA warrants that they put out. They weren't ever actually put forward in a hearing. Apparently, they just got a rubber stamp. So no judge actually sat and had a discourse with lawyers for or against this particular warrant. It was just approved. And nobody reviewed the data. So if nobody reviewed it, and it's all just basically a kangaroo court, for lack of a better analogy, the whole concept of the FISA court and FISA in general needs to be thrown into question.
Well,
surely.
That stuff was always getting rubber stamped anyways. It's not like the government's ever going to act against its own interests.
Oh, yes. I'm not claiming that they weren't doing this from the word dot. What I'm saying is that now that we know that they do this, surely there's something that must be done to prevent its being done in future. Because I'm not saying that the state will do it, because we all know it won't, but something has to give here. And the fact that they're targeting the current leader of the state, at least in the official capacity, does sort of leave them open to attack.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly open to suggestions for how to go about it, you know?
Well, I mean, I don't know how many people we have who are lawyers listening to this show, but surely somebody could basically address a legal discourse or a legal problem with regards to what is going on. and the fact that they aren't even following their own protocols with regards to how they're supposed to act. Those types of things do have importance, and there are avenues, I'm pretty damn sure, to actually put the kibosh on that type of thing. I mean, for
are
example,
there though? We've kind
well,
of known for a long time that laws are just for little people, anyways.
well, I know laws are mostly for the plebs like us, mate, but even so, there's the concept of law is supposed to be not governed by necessarily the government, it's supposed to be governed by a principle. And that's how people have to start thinking of these things, is principle in a principled way, because principles matter. Consistency fucking matters. If you don't have a consistent set of principles, if you have to constantly compromise them all the time, then you're never going to get anywhere. Nobody will. You'll just piss everybody off all the time because nobody will be able to trust you properly. Just like we can't trust the politicians.
Right. Well, and that's the thing too, though. Like when you're monopolizing the guns and when you're trying to monopolize the use of force, it doesn't matter if they trust you or not. No.
Well, that's fair enough. I'm just, there are some concerns at the moment because people are wondering if the current administration put the extensions through without review via an obscure loophole in the FISA law. There was no court hearing on the Carter Page FISA warrant because of some loophole, apparently, in the law itself. And that needs addressing if it exists. I'm not convinced. I think they just said, just do it. And they said, yes, massa.
So, on this note, because we need to get to whatever comments exist relatively soon, but on this note, cryptic-cynic, why don't you take that article away that we were just talking about in chat?
All right. This is also from the Free Thought Project. Forget Russia, social media giants banning alternative voices will directly influence elections. As the Russian hacking conspiracy theorists continue pining away in their relentless attempt to prove Russian interference in the U.S. 2016 elections, Americans in general are unaware of the far more sinister interference taking place right now in the form of their social media news feeds. Social media giants like Google, Facebook, and Twitter have gone on the offensive in the past few weeks and executed a full-on purge of various accounts they claim violate their terms of use. While it is certainly within the rights of these companies to refuse service to anyone they like, their influence in the political sphere should not be overlooked. With the click of a mouse, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple effectively erased Alex Jones from their platforms earlier this month. While many people cheered on this removal, conservatives included, because of his vitriolic and often closed-minded approach, it was just the beginning of a full-on press to silence those who challenged the status quo. Since Alex Jones was banned, individuals on the right and left have found themselves being purged from the interwebs, or others have found themselves on the other end of a shadow ban so massive that they would reach more people yelling from a street corner than tweeting or posting to their tens of thousands, even millions of fans. While there are currently no metrics to show just how large of an effect these bans, shadow bans, and suspensions have been in silencing voices who attempt to put forward a narrative that challenges the status quo, one would have to be completely out of it not to realize the implications of such control over information. To put this into perspective, let's assume for the moment that the Russian government actually did launch a massive social media campaign aimed at influencing elections, and they had countless bots doing this for them. Even if they had millions of users actively putting out disinformation, their dissent would essentially be powerless to the almighty algorithm who could and already has castrated their reach with the click of a mouse. Last month, Facebook deleted thousands of pages they say were linked to Russia. Consequently, a leftist page that was set up to counter the right-wing Unite the Right rally in D.C. That claims it was not linked to Russia at all was also taken down. Last month, activist Noam Chomsky accused Israel of brazenly interfering in U.S. electoral politics in a way that vastly outweighs any efforts that may have been carried out by Russia. And he's right. First of all, if you're interested in foreign interference in our elections, whatever the Russians may have done barely counts or weighs in the balance as compared with what another state does openly, brazenly, and with enormous support, he said. Yet there is no mention of Israel's interference by any of the social media giants because they promote the establishment's agenda of constant war and growing the police state. And just goes on to mention alternatives like Steemit, which hopefully a lot of people have heard about. And yeah, I mean, it's just ridiculous, the idea of them being our protector. I mean, I don't even know how to process this whole thing, really. People jumping on board for Facebook to protect them from fake news and all of that. Just, I mean, it just makes me lose whatever faith I had in the social media people, which makes me glad I have never taken to Facebook. But I realize that a lot of people are on there, and unfortunately, for better or for worse, it's still a major platform out there. And if you get silenced, you take away a lot of potential exposure to your content.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
And if nobody has anything to say on that, I'm gonna bring up another article, and then we can get into whatever comments show up.
Yeah, please do.
Go ahead, mate.
Because I think that article relatively well stands on its own. I mean, obviously, I think that people should just step out of their echo chamber. Maybe talk to one person you disagree with a day, like I try to. Fucking do something to step outside of the chambers that they're building for you, because they're building walls and they're encouraging people, the common person, to build walls, like those block together lists, like the one I got added to for being a furry Nazi somehow. Fucking still makes me laugh. Five Eyes governments seek control over Silicon Valley companies with security backdoor. This is from Activist Post by Aaron Kessel. The governments of Australia, United States, United Kingdom, Canada, and New Zealand announced they intend to force encryption technology providers to provide lawful access to users' encrypted communications, IT News reported. At the five-county ministerial meeting on the Gold Coast last week, security and immigration officials put forward a range of proposals to combat terrorism and crime, with an emphasis on the future of the internet and encryption technology. As part of the Five Eyes umbrella agreement, the countries share intelligence with one another, as was revealed by Edward Snowden. As a reminder, Snowden exposed that the Five Eyes countries had hacked into and planted spyware on at least 50,000 networks nationwide. This was done through the NSA team called Tailored Access Operations, TAO. The malware was designed to compromise routers, switches, and firewalls to monitor entire networks. Now we have the same countries seeking to, quote, encourage information and communications technology service providers to voluntarily establish lawful access solutions to their product and services. This will apply to all products and services operated in the Five Eyes countries, which could see legislation to push implementation of a backdoor in technologies. Quote, should governments continue to encounter impediments to lawful access to information necessary to aid the protection of the citizens of our countries, we may pursue technological, enforcement, legislative, or other measures to achieve lawful access solutions, the Five Eyes Joint Statement on Encryption said. If the legislation passes, this will allow the ability to create backdoors and applications and services that will enable communications interception capabilities for law enforcement officials. Governments around the world have consistently been criticized by cryptography and security experts as dangerous for wanting backdoors for decades now. The counter-argument against the government is that it makes the technology less secure for users, despite the criticisms and concerns that backdoors in Five Eyes countries and services could be exploited and abused by anyone in the world. The Five Eyes countries have pursued interception capabilities, stating that by not having this backdoor, it's a violation of the rule of law. At the summit, the Five Eyes countries also issued a joint statement on countering the illicit use of online spaces. While the statement says the 5 countries are, quote, committed to an open, safe, and secure internet, it also calls for the tech industry to develop solutions that, quote, will prevent illegal and illicit content from ever being uploaded to their servers in the first place. Human and automated systems should be developed to seek out and remove illegal content, the Five Eyes nations said. Illegal content isn't defined, which is the scary part. While you may define illegal content yourself, given this type of authority to a shadowy government coalition is the literal definition of insanity. There's already a legal definition for illegal content, so there should be no need for a joint coalition with shadowy influence in charge of what is uploaded to servers of private companies, preventing the uploading of what they define. This meeting did not include the 9 Eyes and 14 Eyes countries. So why is this important and a cause for concern? There's plenty more there, but we're running out of time. So I figured I'd just bring that up because those 3 articles in combination with one another, Facebook's war room to control midterm ideas, fucking social media giants already having a stranglehold on your communication, and then the last bastion of mainstream support before you just get a VPS and self-host all your content with access given to very specific people alone is encrypted technology, which may be going by the wayside very, very, very soon to anybody who isn't interested in facing massive legal pressure from our overlords in suits, which you, again, should not shoot.
Can I just add as well, everything that the Five Eyes letter said was wrong. It's not in a line with the law to consider somebody guilty by proxy or by association directly. You don't control what your users do with your service if your service is something like providing hosting. You don't control that. All you can do is write terms and conditions, and if they violate those terms and conditions, retract service. That's it. That's all you legitimately can do as a private business.
Well, unless of course you want to be a direct provider of specific content, like licensed shit, like fucking NBC or Fox does, where you have content that you specifically vet and have an entire staff to vet that particular piece, which takes really fucking long time and requires a lot of resources and creates a walled garden in terms of what news people can access, and basically kills the point of the internet to begin with, because hey, if I can't share content on the internet, why am I here? But then of course you realize the fact that this is just going to be used to later prosecute people for doing things that the government could term illegal, rather than actually having anything to say at the particular point. Fucking, and it becomes real obvious what they're trying to do. They're trying to create a massive chilling effect on any potentially illegal speech, where people are going to be afraid to upload jack fucking shit because they're afraid of the consequences.
Well, the whole idea that you need to provide backdoors to an encryption platform to make something more safe. It's absurdity, absolute absurdity. I mean, it is literally. Imagine your front door just for a moment, fully locked and everything else. Then imagine somebody saying, well, in order to make this more secure, we need to put a giant human-sized hole in the middle of it and then cover it up with cellophane, and that'll be secure. Because that's what this is. You just have to obfuscate where that bit of code, what that protocol, the backdoor is, enough to be the cellophane. And that's all you can do. As soon as you create a backdoor into encryption, that is what you create. And if you have that in all forms of encryption, including financial, imagine the hacker's joy to that sort of environment. It'd be ridiculous. Oh God, I cannot express how dangerous that is from a security perspective.
Well, and of course from a freedom perspective, because they go literally hand in hand.
Yeah. But I mean, as to the law component, no, it's not within the law because of the Fourth Amendment. I know most people have forgotten about that, but in the US in particular, that does still apply. And until it doesn't, it isn't within the law. Well, it isn't within the law, the letter of it. And there is no actual legitimate case that could qualify that, or at the moment, one way or the other, because it hasn't been held yet. And the ones that have been held have lent the way that I'm saying. It hasn't gotten to the Supreme Court because in most cases, when it does go to court, which is usually never, because most of these types of events never see the light of day, the courts rule in favor of the defendant because it's a gross breach of their constitutional rights. But as I said, governments don't want this to go to court. That's why they built a specific court to rubber stamp all this shit in secret. If they weren't afraid the courts wouldn't be malleable to this, they wouldn't have done that in the first place. That's why they created that layer of pomp and circumstance, that layer of basically validity to make it seem like this is really legitimate and you don't want to worry your pretty little heads about it. That's the only reason why they did it.
So, do we have any comments here? We're basically out of time, but...
Yeah, well, just one comment, because we didn't get many comments this time, from Finian, who says, shooting won't start unless an attempt to disarm people occurs. Well, I mean, it'll start with a few people, and I know you're one of them, Finian, but there are very few people who are actually going to do jack shit. And I think you and I both know that. So, I mean, I, for one, don't welcome our new robot overlords, but I know that they're coming. And they're coming hard and fast. So, with that in mind, bad morning to all of y'all. We're going to try and get this thing on the road for tomorrow. To get this simulcast. We've got most of the bugs worked out. Now, all we need to do is make sure that my voice can be heard, because that was the only problem. So, with that in mind, we're going to test these things and make sure that they work, and you should be able to see us with our brand new setup tomorrow, and I think you're going to like the way it looks. But bad morning. Bad rest of your day. Remember, the state is slowly grinding you into one of the shapes to fit one of its gaps. And the only way out is up. The only way out is recognizing that you are being made a cog in a machine, and to either step out of that machine or grind the gears while you're there until they're nothing but nubs. Because this system, it either has to die, or humans' viral nature will cause the entire house of cards to come tumbling down. They want you as a tax cow. They know you're submissive, and they know that there's every likelihood that even knowing this information will do nothing. So, just remember, you are more powerful than they would ever want you to think you are. And you have the capability to stand up against these people. Absolutely never shoot them. Absolutely never use any violence. But just remember, they control you in their minds. I think it's time to prove them wrong. Bad morning, bad rest of your day. Smash the state and fuck the system.
Have a bad morning, everybody.
We'll see you tomorrow.